Don't.
Hi, welcome, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Red Door Conversations. I'm Marla Lewis, and I'm here with my co host, Tana Young, Kimberly Dixon Dudley,
Hi.
and Lisa White. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well. We're
Doing
doing well,
well.
Marla. How about you?
Good
I'm doing
morning.
good
Morning,
as
Good
well,
girl.
guys.
afternoon.
Can't wait for the show today. Today's topic is something that not very many want to discuss at all, and certainly not from an angle of why. However, as our audience already knows, Red Door Conversations is comprised of dynamic leaders within the real estate industry, but we're also advocates within our community. With that being said, we want to discuss race related issues that are happening in our world right now. Let me start by saying this: we don't condone rioting or looting. However, when human beings experience no justice, history teaches us that human beings begin to feel that they should take justice. We're talking about the devaluing of Black lives and the lack of consequences for those who do. This is why we are tired and something must be done. So let's get with it and let's start talking about it and see what we can get resolved on today's show, Seeking Justice Within Our Justice System.
So I want to introduce a couple of other faces that you guys may see. Today we have two powerful legal voices joining this important conversation. And I'm going to give a little bit of their background so you know who they are and why their voices are important in this narrative. Our first legal expert is managing partner at the Mickey Law Group. She is an outspoken criminal justice advocate. Her expertise is business, employment, and family law. You know, as we've all seen, y'all, I mean, many people entangled in the justice system lose their lives, but a lot of people lose their families. They lose their jobs. They lose contact with their children. And so, you know, we needed to have someone here, and I'm glad that she's here to share her expertise regarding how one might navigate that process when those things happen to you. So, Ms. Kamisha Mickey, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Appreciate you. Our second legal voice is a Houston criminal defense attorney and civil rights advocate. You may have seen her on your evening news advocating strongly for people without a voice, giving those people voices. You know, she spent 18 years advocating and providing legal representation at an affordable cost for indigent clients, and we welcome her to the show. Attorney Sadia Evangelista, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Queen.
Yeah, thank you. So, ladies, in light of the current unrest that's occurring in our country right now, as a result of legal systemic oppressive issues, we welcome your voice to the conversation. It's important. We appreciate your efforts. I spoke with a civil rights advocate from the 60s here in Houston just this week, y'all, and I asked him, I said, you know, what do you liken this moment to? What does this feel like? And he said, I'm gonna keep it together. He said, this reminds me of the summer of 1963. The summer of 1963 is when Medgar Evers was assassinated. The summer of 1963 is when citizens marched on Washington. Summer of 63 is when Martin gave his famous I Have a Dream speech in that march. And it's also the summer where firemen turned their water hoses on children while they were protesting. So, you know, at this point, sadly, we really are at a point where we're repeating egregious moments in our history. I'm saddened, but I'm encouraged at the same time because people like yourselves, Kamisha, Mickey, and Sister Sadia, y'all are stepped forward with your knowledge and your expertise to help navigate this process and give a voice to people who do not always have a voice, to create some positive change right now when we don't see very much of that. So we thank you all for your efforts out in the field helping people, but we also thank you for sharing your narrative here on the show. That said, there are some lives that need to be mentioned, and we have an important guest here joining us as well to share her story. Lisa, did you want to introduce her?
Yes, she is having some difficulty getting on our Zoom call, on our Zoom show. I've been texting back and forth with her, but the person that I want to introduce you guys to today, her name is Andrea Valentine. This is someone that I've been knowing since I was probably about 13 years old, and I will be 46 on Sunday. So I've been knowing this lady more than half of my life. She is the mother of my nephew. I have one nephew. His name is Jeffrey Cordero Archangel. He is 28 years old right now. So we have been dealing with the justice system for a little bit over 3 years now. And his mother, who is on our show, Andrea Valentine, she has just been in the trenches trying to get her son home. Of course, she's doing what any other mother would do for their child. And so this lady is, she's an educated woman. She has a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies. She has a master's degree from U of H Victoria in entrepreneurship and community development. She was a great mother to her 2 children. And she taught them values. She taught them, to have confidence, self-esteem, what it is to be a citizen of this supposedly great country that we live in. And I wanted her to come today just so that she could tell the story that she's been, her experience that she's been dealing with for the past 3 years with the justice system. Again, she's still having some difficulty getting on here. I see where she just X'd out and she's trying to log back on, but I want to introduce to you guys Miss Andrea Valentine. So we're going to, I know she's trying to get back on here, and whenever she comes back on, then she can just begin her, her story.
Before we do that though, I wanted to share some statistics with our listeners since we're in Houston, Harris County right now. Say it again.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, right now we have something like 8,000 inmates in Harris County Jail, and 80% of them haven't been convicted or had a court date. I mean, if you let that sink in, these people haven't been convicted of a crime. They haven't been given due process, a court date. And Jeffrey Archangel, your nephew is one of those people. That's why, it's important for people to understand what's happening, and as a result of this a system that's not working. So her coming on and sharing her story from him being in there for 3 years and what they've tried to do to resolve this issue is so important. And, I can't even imagine, she's one mother, but she's one of thousands, Sister Sadia, you deal in the criminal defense world a lot. And so I know you see a lot of these similar stories. I mean, what, for someone like Jeffrey and the many others who are sitting there waiting on a court date, what do you tell these folks?
A lot of times what happens, the injustice of it all is a lot of people who are sitting, they get very anxious and impatient because they want to be out in the real world resuming their lives. And so what we end up seeing is, in my situation, I have a lot of clients who would rather plead to cases that they're not guilty of because they want to be out. A lot of times they can't afford the bond. Many times they may have some priors and the bond may be so high that is just egregious, that there is no justice in that. So when you talk about, dealing with the marginalized people, this discriminatory treatment, systematic racism, I mean, it's deeply enrooted in our criminal justice system. And we talk about, slavery was over. But when you look at what's really going on in the incarceration of Black people, colored people, it's evident it still exists.
Right. Right.
Now, Sister Sadia, you mentioned about the a lot of your clientele not being able to make bond. Last year, we saw a historic U.S. District Court ruling deeming that Harris County bail system is unconstitutional.
Absolutely.
Prior to, if you couldn't make bail, what would happen?
They would sit. Families would lose, the bail system. And let me say this, Judge Daryl Jordan, who was at the forefront of this, despite, I greatly appreciate his leadership. I worked with him as a criminal defense lawyer before he became a judge, but just as practicing attorneys, we see this was a known common act of our clients sitting or the families losing money because of how egregious or how high
We lost your voice. You're muted.
But it's a fight that has to.
Can you hear me now?
Now we're in COVID-19. We're present.
Yes. Andrea, we can hear you. Are you there?
I'm here. You just can't see me, right?
Judges were, able to get cases moved, but there's a delay right now because folks are not handling cases. Prosecutors have so many cases on their docket that it's so insurmountable to move quickly. And then the criminal defense attorneys, we're ready for our clients to be out or for their cases to be resolved. But because of what we see with the pandemic, it makes it even worse.
Mm. Andrea, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys.
So
I just dialed in from a desk phone because I don't know what's going on technically with my phone or my system because it was working fine initially. I'm here. I guess you just can't see me.
That's okay.
Yeah, that'll be fine. We just need to hear your story. Thank you so much for going the extra mile and doing what you need to do to get on so our listeners can hear your story.
Absolutely. I definitely want my story to be heard. Am I on live now?
You
Yes.
are.
Are
Why don't you tell us what happened, when it happened, and where we are today?
Okay. March 2017, police came to my house. They received a tip that my daughter's car was used in a robbery murder. Not sure if anybody saw it, but it was all over the news where the young man was killed at the subway station. When they came to my house, they initially came there looking for my daughter's car, and Derek and my daughter were there at the time they came. They took them down to interrogate them, and they also confiscated my daughter's car. To make a long story short, a month later, they came back to my house to arrest my son. They took him down. They arrested him initially on the robbery, the aggravated robbery. A month later, they came back to arrest him on the capital murder case. So they had his face all over the news. His initial attorney was Shannon Baldwin. When they put the second warrant out for him, we reached out to her to no avail. So I reached out to Quanell X. He helped me to turn my son in so that they wouldn't shoot him down in the street because they put all over the news that he was armed and dangerous and do you know where he is? And you guys know how they do things. Anyway, it's been 3 years now. My son has had no court time. They reset him every time. They have DNA evidence that says the DNA found in the car belonged to Derek Welch Jr. That is the initial suspect. That is the person on the sketch that they brought to me. My son doesn't fit the description. Initially, the detective told me he was too old because the description says that the suspects were between 16 and 20 years old and about 5'7". My son was 25, no facial hair. Don't let me leave that part out. My son is 25 years old, was 25 years old at the time. He had dreads and facial hair. And so I don't understand how they jumped from the original suspect to my son. Later on, I found out that Derek Welch Jr. and his mom, LaQuisha Fontenot, they call her Moose, had went down to the police station and under oath told them that they overheard my son confess to me that he did the crime, which is so not true. During the first time they detained my son, one of his friends came over and talked to Derek about what happened, because Derek did admit to him and his friend, Joe Van III, had committed those crimes. They also fit the descriptions in the video. The descriptions that the victims gave, they fit them. At any rate, we turned Jeffrey in. His friend had got this recording of Derek saying, no, Jeffrey didn't have anything to do with it. He wasn't there. He didn't even know that it was going down. Later on, Derek tells my daughter his mom told him to say it was Jeffrey. Now, they received a tip from Crime Stoppers saying that that was Derek Welch in that video surveillance that was shown on TV. Through their investigation of Derek, they found out he had a girlfriend named Erica Valentine, my daughter, who drove a car like the one that was initially in the video used as the getaway car. Quanell X told them when they turned him in that they saw that he heard the tape. His exact words were that the young man asked me to turn him in when he was charged with the murder. He said he didn't shoot anybody. He allowed me to listen to this tape. The person in the recording knew everything from A to Z. They had to have been a crime. Said that the tape chills the body from the description the person was giving of what actually happened during the crime. At any rate, like I said, they got DNA that is not my son. There's a picture they put out also with the gunman's hand holding the gun. My son has a tattoo of like a skeletal tattoo on his hand from the same hand that the gunman is holding the gun in. There's a lot of other evidence that I'm not really at liberty to share because the attorneys feel like if I share it, the DA's office will take it and try and use it against us the way they did with the tape. Initially, when they took Jeffrey down, he allowed them to hear the tape. They asked me to come down to bring the original device that the tape was recorded on, and which I did because we were led to believe once they heard the tape and determined that it was Derek's voice that they would let Jeffrey go. No, that wasn't the case, but that's what they led us to believe. They told me they were going to take the tape, have it analyzed, and would get back with me, and they never did. Now, one of the detectives, Detective Crowder, made a statement to Jeffrey that all blacks look alike to white people. And that's just how it is in life. And Jeffrey told me that the officer, the Detective Crowder, he felt like was saying, we don't care if it wasn't you, it doesn't matter. We don't care if we have the wrong person because we see you guys, as far as we're concerned, y'all all look alike. The other detective, Alexander, I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, is Vinogradov or something like that, Vinogradov. He walked me downstairs and told me they want to get the right person. They're going to analyze the tape, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what happened with that, with them. So they took my son's picture when he was 17 years old from his ID because he's never been in trouble before. So they didn't have any mug shots or anything like that of him. I believe that it was photoshopped because when they showed it to me, his complexion was a lot darker. It was made to fit the other pictures in the picture lineup. Derek's picture was nowhere in that lineup. They tell me that one of the victims picked Jeffrey's photo out of that picture lineup. I asked them if they could do a live lineup, and they told me no, they don't have to because they've already done the picture lineup. Long story short, I feel like they're trying to bamboozle my son. They're trying to railroad him. I believe in my heart that they know they have the wrong person. Like I say, the DNA came back according to my son's legal team. The DA said, yeah, the DNA came back as Derek Welch Jr.'s DNA in the car, but we still gonna hold Jeffrey. He might have had something to do with it.
Now,
Unfortunately,
let me ask you this question. So just so that everybody will know and get a basis on time, when did this crime that they are alleging Jeffrey Archangel, when did that take place, and when did he turn himself in?
The crime took place in February of 2017. He turned himself in May of 2017.
Okay. Okay. So from May of 2017 until today, Jeffrey has got continual resets of his case. And how many times has his attorney been to visit with him?
The only time Jeffrey sees his attorney is during the resets for the court. I think he may have gone down there once or twice when it wasn't a court date, and it was only because I called him and got, and I just kind of like demanded that you go see him, because otherwise I'm the only connection that he has to his attorneys as far as getting information to him. They don't share.
Okay, so my next question, Andrea, this is to the legal experts that are on the show today. What is it normal for someone to be in the county jail and have gone 3 years and not been before the judge? Is that normal?
Well, let me say.
I don't know.
Go ahead, sis.
I don't know if it's normal or not.
No, I'm asking. Andrea, I'm asking the legal experts that are on the show.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And Sister Andrea, let me say this. This is Attorney Sadia Evangelista. I know you can't see me, but I'm a practicing attorney, been practicing for 18 years in Harris County, surrounding counties. And just your courage to come forward, to tell your son's story, that is so important, because it's typically the mothers and the girlfriends or the grandmothers, it's the women who advocate on behalf of their loved ones. And it's because of their advocacy that, no stone goes unturned. And so that's what Mother is doing right now. And so let me just say thank you for what you're doing for your son. I saw the other day it was a sister who had a sign, and she said, as it concerned George Floyd, that when he cried out for his mama, he summoned all the mothers.
Absolutely.
And so when we're talking about injustice, Sister Andrea, keep doing what you're doing. Now, let me answer the question: was it right, or is this normal? Unfortunately, when you're dealing with these type of cases, absolutely, it's a normal situation. When you're dealing with capital murder, because he was charged with aggravated robbery with the deadly weapon and capital murder. And because of the loss of life, because of all of the testing that has to be done, it looks like he has a court-appointed attorney. And I can't really speak to the case ethically, because he does have an attorney. He has, I believe, a couple of attorneys on this, because this is and when you are doing capital offenses, representing clients who've been charged with a capital offense, you have to be certified. So there's a particular type of training that Tyrone Moncrief, who is his attorney, looks like, and I don't know the person, but there is a specific type of training in order to defend clients who've been charged with this type of case. So yes, it's normal. There's a lot that goes into these type of cases, as far as testing, as far as witnessing. And then what we're seeing now is, with the pandemic and all the backup in Harris County with all the trials, his case is going to keep getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So I'm not sure if this case is set for a trial yet. Is it, Mother?
No, it hasn't been set for trial at all. His attorneys are telling me that they're having issues getting information that they need from the other side. And let me just say this, unfortunately, Derek Jr. is deceased. He was murdered. He was shot down in a car. It was on the news. It was like a high profile case as well, where the car was riddled with over 50 bullets from AK-15. I'm not that familiar with guns, but it was on the news and everything. So he isn't here to say to do what he said he would do, which was not allow Jeffrey to take on something he didn't do. Now, his mother, Lucretia, is still here. His dad, Derek Welch Sr., is here. His entire family knows that he did this crime. They know that my son has been locked up for it, but nobody wants to come forward and say anything.
And that's a tremendous hurdle to overcome because of the person who allegedly actually did the crime. And I say allegedly because I gotta measure my words.
Right, I understand.
Who actually did the crime? He's no longer here to even testify on your son's behalf, or for the attorney to even cross-examine where his whereabouts or his involvement in this particular crime. So that's another difficulty factor in this particular case as well.
Actually, there were two people who committed the crime. The second young man, Joe Van III, alive and well and running around town, like living his normal life, like nothing has ever happened. And as far as I know, they aren't even looking for him. They are concentrating, in my opinion, on trying to pin this on my child, on my son. What I can't understand is why. Why would they want to pin something on someone who doesn't, number one, he doesn't fit it. Number two, they were so adamant in the beginning that it was Derek Welch Jr. who committed the crime. They got tips from Crime Stoppers more than once, giving them Derek's name, never my son's name. How did they turn their attention? What I want to understand is, how did they turn their attention from the initial suspect to my son?
And it sounds like it came from the Crime Stopper, but without reading the file, I can't really.
Crime Stoppers gave them Derek's name, not my son's. So what I'm asking is, how did they take their attention off of Derek, the original suspect, the person that they kept getting tips on Crime Stoppers from? How could they jump off of him and onto my son? I just think it's based on something that Derek said. I know it's based off of something that Derek and his mom said, but I don't understand either why their words weighed more than mine did. When my son was at home, and like I said, we have proof of this. I just can't, be any more specific about it. The clothing that they wore in the videos, I'm gonna say this. I got a picture of Derek wearing those exact same clothing.
So what it sounds like, Mother, the only way for Brother Jeffrey to be able to get the justice that he deserves is to actually try his case, to present his evidence. And that's where the trial comes into. So, in my suggestion is a trial date needs to be had. Now, I know right now with the state of Texas, there probably will not be any trials till with a jury till after August. And then he may not be a preferential trial because it's a capital murder trial. There may be a bunch of other trials in front of him. But my suggestion is to advocate to get a trial date as soon as possible, because once you get the trial date, then you'll have everything you're saying with your attorney, and you have well-able expert attorneys who this is what they do. This is all they've done. The amount of trials that they've had will be able to present the evidence on your son's behalf, because it sounds like it's an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows that it was not him. And there is a lot of reasonable doubt that he even committed this crime. So if you're able to show, or he's able to show, his attorneys, that there's a tremendous amount of reasonable doubt as it concerns all of the evidence that you've just enunciated to us, and it's a lot more as well that you don't know about.
Sister Sadea.
Ma'am.
Hi, Sister Sadea, I have a question for you. How long does it normally take to get a trial date for these type of charges? Is this normal for it to take 3 years?
And sometimes even more, honestly, yes.
I have a
Well,
question.
There's nothing that can be
More.
done to expedite.
This is the thing, but in these type of cases, because you're dealing with a capital murder type of case, you really don't want to rush the evidence or the investigation. You want to do as much as you can, absolutely, especially when you're dealing with live witnesses. You want to get their statements, get their mental impressions as close to the incident as possible. But then you know, there may be expert witnesses involved. So in trial cases, you have two phases. You have the guilt and the innocence, and then you have the punishment phase.
Mhm.
So with
So
the,
even with there being a lack of evidence, it still takes this long,
typically,
you know, to.
in my experience, yes.
Mhm.
3 years, yes. And I think a lot because he's sitting in jail. He's in custody right now, right, Mother?
Yes, without a bond.
Without a
He-
bond, I see that. Without a bond,
And
then
no
it makes it,
bond hearing. Nothing.
and yeah, because he's sitting in jail, it makes it more difficult. Because it feels like there's no traction, there's no movement. But I'm actually looking at the clerk's site and seeing what has been filed, what the activities were, and there's been a tremendous amount of activity in these type of cases, in your case, in your son's case specifically. But it's just the wheels of justice in Harris County, unfortunately, it goes very, very slow.
now,
And Harris
Daniel,
County
let
is
me-
one of the, in Texas is one of it's the more progressive, because I've been to other counties and you may get, you know, once every 6 months a reset, and you're just sitting there. And I had a murder case in Waller County, and that was since 2017, and it's still pending.
Mm.
Now, let me say this, let me ask you this. I know that you mentioned Tyrone Moncrief as an attorney. I believe that he's listed as second chair, but let me just say this, he's done nothing on the case. So he's not even present. That is not who her interaction has been with. He's just listed. Am I correct, Andrea?
You are correct. And I wanted to let her know that my son saw you. He gave me your name prior to even knowing that this was going to happen today. He had given me your name and asked me to contact you on his behalf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is Felicia. I have a
Mhm.
question, because when I spoke with Kim originally about this case, they asked me about bail. And since I don't do an overwhelming amount of criminal law, I was trying to explain to her, with capital murder, bail is not guaranteed, correct?
No.
Mm.
So he could potentially, it's normal that he could go this long without a bail hearing or without receiving bail.
Yes, because in these because there has been a murder that took place, a loss of life, and people may feel the prosecutor probably, and I don't know, I haven't looked at the motions, filed a motion as it concerns, you know, the safety of the other people around. So when you're dealing with the safety of individuals, what's in the best interest of justice, that would be the case.
Now, even though there's no prior criminal record, if you look on there, what you're going to see are some traffic tickets, which everybody here on the show may have had one of those at some point.
What about the evidence? Because it's been this long. I'm concerned, is the evidence safe since mom gave it to, you know, handed that over to the police department? Is that evidence still safe?
No.
And
In
would
mom's
you
opinion, it's
expound
not.
on that? Would you expound on that, Andrea?
According to the legal team, they did not send the tape off to the FBI to have it analyzed to determine whether or not it's Derek's voice on there, and whether or not, I guess, he sounds in distress or whatever. Then at one point, it's like, okay, it's Derek's voice, but he may be under duress. Okay, then another point, they go out and they hire an independent consultant to say that that's not Derek's voice on the tape. When I know for sure, they know for sure, that is Derek's voice on the tape. He wasn't even aware that he was being recorded.
So
He only
I,
found out.
I have a comment here, and this is for the attorneys. And I heard you say this, Sister Sadia, the wheels of justice move slow. And I think the frustration for the families and the communities who are experiencing these slow moving wheels of justice is that you said something too, is safety. I mean, if there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that this individual who's sitting in jail is innocent, but there's a person who may have committed the actual crime out on the streets, how safe, how much justice is that? Even for us, the people who are wandering out here thinking that we are safe, but there's a killer maybe potentially on the streets. So, and I know that there's so many layers to how, that's processed, but, I think it's overwhelming for a family to say there's so much evidence proving that I'm innocent. And if I'm an individual and I hear this, I may be innocent and there could be evidence proving that, but I still spend years of my life away from my family, my livelihood, because of what? And then what do I do? I think that thousands of people are like, I'm innocent, I'm in jail, but there may be someone guilty out here who continues to commit crimes. How do we reconcile that? Or in your opinions, what can we do to reconcile that issue?
Well, let me say this, shows like this, mothers like Sister Andrea, is going to be very important because it happens so often, but it doesn't get talked about. And so because you're bringing the awareness and you're shining a spotlight in the darkness, and the mother's cry is not going to be unheard because her cry is loud, then the attention is going to be drawn to it. I promise you, have you contacted the district attorney's office as it concerns this case directly, Mom? Let me ask you that. Kim Ogg's office directly?
I sent an email. However, I was advised by my son's legal team not to. I asked if I could speak to her or contact her office. I asked them, because news media has wanted to interview me for a long time. I have been advised.
What'd you say? Somebody say don't do that?
Yeah, no, don't do that. You don't want to jeopardize the defense that your attorneys may have for you by speaking out. And you may know a lot more, and your testimony is going to be way important. And you're doing a lot of talking on here now, and I wouldn't suggest too much of the information going out after we have this conversation. But you have a lot of information that could help. And so you don't want it to be turned against you.
Absolutely. And so I was advised.
You sound like a witness in this case. And so you don't want to give too much information out or jeopardize your safety as well. Because as you were saying, Sister Kimberly, you're talking about somebody who could potentially be the real killer out there. And so if that other person that's not deceased who's watching this, listening to this, or is involved in the case, they don't want to be implicated in this either. So, we have in our community, we don't snitch, don't ask, don't tell, turn your head the other way. It does us a lot of damage as well, because we're losing a lot of our lives in our own community by Black on Black violence or just crimes, period, against each other. So unfortunately, this is our reality that does have to change. But this talk show and other talk shows like this and mothers like Sister Andrea, it is important that we do let our voices be heard. And then not all lawyers are bad lawyers. Not all public defenders are bad lawyers. Sis, I'm going to tell you that Brother Troy, he is an excellent defense attorney, whether he's number 2 or number 1. So what I believe that
I do believe that Tyrone Moncrief is an excellent attorney. My disappointment is the lack of his participation in this particular case.
Understood.
So
Understood.
I have a question to the experts. You were saying earlier on that mom should try her best to get the case moved to trial. My question is, how can she effectively do those things. We know that the wheels of justice turn slow. We understand that. What as a mother can she do to effectively help to get the case to trial?
So if I was her, and I'm speaking as a mother, if I was Mother Andrea, I would worry the hell out of the attorneys.
Done.
I would
Already.
have my son, I would talk to my son, have my son tell them I want a speedy trial. Because 3 years is long enough. It's been 3 years. They should have gotten all their evidence, their investigative reports, expert witnesses. I saw that there was some motions for expert witness. And I would have him push his lawyers to file a motion for a speedy trial with the judge. That's what I would do if I was the mama.
Okay, may I interject just a little bit? He how can he do that when they don't come see him? You know, he has no access to them. So how can he do that? And number two, he asked me to ask you a question as far as him filing some type of complaint to the state bar as far as his case is concerned, and the length of time that it has taken, and he still doesn't have a case. What he wants to know is he wants to know whether or not that is an option for him, and if it is an option for him, how does he go about it? What type of language does he use in the body of it? Because we aren't familiar with the justice system. We don't know how it works. We don't know the right questions to ask. We don't know the right people to contact. And when you don't particularly have a bunch of faith in your legal team, what do?
And that's understandable. Let me say this now. Some of those questions I can't answer. Let me tell you why. Because it would be unethical for me to answer those questions, because he's already has attorney of counsel, attorney of record. So I can't give any advice on the case. But in situations where you're not happy with your attorney, as a client, you have a right to fire your attorney. I don't care if it's a court appointed or not, or public defender. And he can write a handwritten motion to the court that he wishes to have another attorney. He's in custody right now, so he has a right to send out mail, legal mail. So I would suggest him putting it in writing, writing his attorneys, requesting, what is the status? Come see about me. I want a speedy trial. I haven't heard what the activities going on in the case. So my suggestion would be to have him to correspond via a written correspondence via the jail mail. But if you're not happy with your attorney, and I'm not telling anybody this, I've replaced many attorneys before because they weren't happy. I don't go out, disparaging other attorneys, because I know this is a difficult job for all of us. And when you're on the other side, especially as family members, a lot of the things you don't see that is going on, that is going to be detrimental or effective for the case, family members don't see it. So it seems like sometimes we're not working when we are. And then you do have those attorneys who sit down on the job.
Thank you.
I don't think that's the case, based on everything I'm seeing that has been filed for this particular case. But you want to speed it up. You want your day in court. You want to be able to present the evidence that you do have. The prosecutor is going to do the right thing. And I believe Kim Ogg's office, especially in the climate that we have now, she's going to want to do the right thing. Then they're going to take a second look at the case. And I don't know who the chief prosecutor is on this case. I know that the prosecutor, and that's another thing, Mom, you've probably had many of prosecutors that have taken over this case. So So that's another problem. You have a lot of turnover in Harris County District Attorney's office. So then what happens is the case gets assigned to somebody else. They got to get abreast. They got to figure out what's going on. So it's like starting from scratch all over again. And that's what I mean when I said the wheels go slowly, because I could have 4 or 5 ADAs on the case before the case is actually resolved. So that's another issue that we're dealing with when it comes to the district attorney's office and getting some kind of disposition of these type of cases. But
And I have
mom,
one,
mhm, just keep,
one
just,
other question. As far as Jeffrey writing to his attorneys, it's supposed to be some type of attorney-client privilege going on there, but
It
I
is.
know for a fact that the mail that he receives and that goes out, they make copies of all of it. All of
Mhm.
it.
They're not supposed to. And
So
when
they
it goes
make
out, they're not supposed to read his mail either. Now, on the correspondence, let me ask you this. On the correspondence, does it says legal correspondence or letter to attorney? Or, because if it's not, they're gonna read it. Every phone call that happens in Harris County Jail or anybody else's jail, they're gonna record it and they're gonna be listening. And so, and to
Yeah.
those who are listening now, if you have a loved one who's incarcerated or in an inmate in a county jail, believe me, every phone call and every letter is going to be read. Every unless it is a legal phone call or a legal correspondence. Because I can't tell you how many clients thought that no one was listening either, and I get a stack of CDs and papers, mail, where they incriminated themselves. So I want you to be mindful about that as well.
Andrea, do you have one last question for Sadia before we move to our next part of the show?
I don't. I just appreciate, I appreciate her coming on and talking with me.
Absolutely.
The thing, I'll do one question is if my son wanted to contact you, could he contact you? Or could I? Could we talk?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just know that I can't talk to him, give him advice. He, because he is
Right.
represented by counsel. But, as a community activist, as a supporter of you and your son, absolutely, I can talk to him.
How can she reach
Absolutely.
you?
Now, the thing that I'd like to say, because we're all the four of us are real estate brokers, and the thing about it is within our industry, what's important to me is once this young man is exonerated, and after it's gone to trial, what would the experts suggest as far as him putting his life back together? And the reason it's important to us is because a lot of times these adults need housing, and this is affected. There was Kim. Are you there, Kim?
I'm here.
Okay. So this affects us as real estate brokers. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. This was top of mind. And Kamisha, Mickey, I want to get your insight on this because it's the employment, it's the housing, it's contact with child services afterwards. I'm going to share this with our audience before we wrap. I'm doing my continuing education, and as brokers, we're required to do a Legal 1, Legal 2 update. And I read a sentence in the Legal 1 update that was so jarring to me that I shared it with my co-host, and it said, this is the warning. Texas Real Estate Commission issued a warning to landlords and agents regarding criminal records using criminal records during tenant screenings. And it said, according to HUD, this is the sentence, Blacks and Hispanics are arrested, convicted, and incarcerated at rates disproportionate to their population. So, I stopped at that sentence because it went on to suggest that we not consider prior arrest, but only convictions when approving or considering an application for lease. I stopped and I had to take a pause because what I thought was other whole factions of our society are having to adjust the way they operate to accommodate racism in our justice system. I mean, that's a fact. And so my question to Attorney Mickey is, if you're that person or this is your loved one after you've been either wrongfully or rightfully convicted of something and you've been or arrested or something, how do you handle the narrative of, hey, Mr. Employer, I want a job, but I was arrested for this crime, not convicted. Does it show on the record, one, if you're just arrested and not convicted? And two, if this is your circumstance and you've been, incarcerated or it's on your record, how do you handle like a housing conversation with a landlord? Are they able to discriminate? Because here's the part, and I'll say this and I'll finish my question. I stopped at that because I felt like we were almost complicit in this. You know, I can't count the number of times I've told a landlord, well, you know, he's got a record here and this is something you may need to consider. And I'm like, wait a minute, without even thinking about the layers that went into how that even occurred. So if I'm a person who's either been arrested, convicted, incarcerated, one wrongfully or rightfully, how do I handle the conversation with my employer, my housing landlord, or, you know, child services if my children have been taken from me at that point?
Well, a lot of different things. First of all, anybody who's been arrested or convicted, or had any dealings with criminal law, once that situation is over, I always recommend they speak to a criminal lawyer about either an expungement or a non-disclosure, because if they can get that, that certainly helps, because there are certain things, once you've gotten the non-disclosure or the expungement, housing applications, employers, they can't see those things. So I mean, if at all possible,
How does
that.
So how does it come up on their background check once we run their background, and if it's expunged, like how will it show on the background?
Depending on what agency you are or who's looking, I think it's expungements, they're only available to certain people. Like I think the government will still see certain things, but your regular employer who's not a government agency, no, they just won't see it. It does not show for them.
Okay.
And
what is the cost to have that done?
It would be another criminal attorney, like their attorney fee. Because I don't.
Okay.
So it's a filing fee. There's a filing fee, typically like $300 to $350, and then attorneys would charge their retainer. So like you said, you have the expungement. Expungement is the record is destroyed. But with the non-disclosure, you'll see with a lot of people who had deferred adjudications, it's a probation. You complete it, you don't have a final conviction, but it's still on your record. Then with the non-disclosure, it seals the record. Like you said, it doesn't throw it away or destroys it, because the government can come look behind it. So if you like want to go for a bar, get your real estate license, any licensing agency can look. But typically for, I guess, like landlords, it wouldn't show anything.
Wow.
Okay, that's good information. Sister Sadia, I have a question for you. So we listened to Andrea's story about Jeffrey. If this was your case, what would you do differently if you were to do something differently on this case?
If it was my, I don't know if I would do anything differently, because some of this is not even in my hands. You're dealing with the judge, you know, and it's the judge's discretion in these capital murder cases as far as the bonds, and when you're dealing with the docket of the court. But up front, I would do as much activity as far as gathering the evidence as I possibly can. And it looks like they filed many subpoenas on this case and have expert witnesses on the defense side. Now, you know, unless I talk to the actual defense attorneys, I'm not sure what's going on now. But a lot of this stuff has been halted because of COVID-19, and he probably will not get a trial date, honestly, to probably 2021. And with
that said, with him getting a trial date around 2021, once he's exonerated, because I'm gonna speak favor into his case, once he's exonerated, what are the chances of Jeffrey being able to get restitution for time lost?
I can't answer that, because he hasn't, if he's exonerated, I mean, he may be able to, there may be able to be a civil suit on this, because that's not my area. That's just like a civil area. So I can't speak to that, because he wouldn't have been convicted and wrongfully convicted. You see, if he's exonerated, then there's not a conviction. But if he was convicted and then he was exonerated after he was conviction, then there's money set aside for that.
We understand.
So, and we say we speak in favor, so we speaking of not guilty.
That's right.
Not a guilty, then wrongful overturning, you know, of the conviction. But we're speaking a not guilty on his case.
I would like to throw the case out. I want to speak
Dismissal.
That's right.
Dismissal. Yes.
That's right. Yes, ma'am. So we're all in agreement, right? Dismissal.
Yes, dismissal.
Right.
I want to thank you. Andrea, let me thank you and our legal experts for joining the podcast on today. It warms my heart that you guys spent your lunch basically with us to impart some wisdom and some insight on this case and how we move forward once he's back at home. I really appreciate you guys. For those of our listeners, if you want to be a part of the movement to help bring my nephew back home,
It's
Yes,
okay, Lisa. It's okay.
we with you, sis. We
It's
with you.
okay.
I will have a link to a petition that we've started in the notes, in the comments on this podcast. Guys, this has just been very hard for my family, so I'm so sorry. I thought I was gonna be able to hold it all together. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, Lisa. You don't have to apologize. I've been over here trying to hold it together myself. This
So-
has literally stopped my entire life, not just my son's, but mine. It's
So
hard to move on when you know your child is innocent
absolutely.
and you got to go out to prove. It's just not fair. And I know the world ain't fair, but it's a hard pill to swallow, lady.
This is the start of the movement that we're having to bring him home. Again, I will post the link to the petition in the notes to this show on our Facebook page. And we would be most appreciative if you would like us, share our posts, if you would love the post, and if you would subscribe to our Instagram. We're on all outlets at Red Door Conversations. Thank you guys again for joining the show. Have a
Thank you for
wonderful
having us.
weekend.
Thank you.
Fabulous.